It's actually many years since I've been down to Goondiwindi. The last time I was here was for one of the Gourmet and Gundi events, and I did some cooking classes with a Brisbane chef at the time. And clearly in those years, lots of impetus has come about with the region, not the least of which, aren't you the luckiest Queensland town?
Yes.
And isn't that the luckiest hotel, I might add, to get the front page? But seriously, what a great article about a small regional country town. Every one of those stories I thought was fantastic. You just forgot to say that you're such a short drive from Brisbane, which is one of the points I'll be making on radio, because it is a short drive. Now, people think nothing of going up the coast, down the coast to somewhere, a lot longer than that, and yet 4 hours out of Brisbane, and here you are. So it's something I think that's very achievable to be drawing on that market as such. In what has emerged though, the thing that I really want to ask about this region and putting that cohesive face to it all when it comes to the produce is there a database of the produce? And I'd like this to come up in our Q&A session later, but at the same time, I forgot to say at the beginning, if anyone wants to ask a question, do as I'm going through. But is there a full database that is across the whole of the regional area? Who maintains the database? How often is it updated? And who can use it? How readily available is it? Can anyone ring up whoever has it, who's going to take on that role, and give it out to anybody? This I'm going to pass around. This is the producer directory database for the Scenic Rim region. It's a very good document, and it is freely available to anyone who contacts the council.
Did the council put that together?
The council puts that together. And it is invaluable. I don't know why, but in some regions they get very possessive about those things. Now, when you think about it, that's the silliest thing they could do. This is meant to be, a database is about letting within the region and outside the region know what happens in your area. So
Alison,
what if I...
Alison, do you all know where the Scenic Rim is? Do you all know where, does that...
Okay, it goes from Mount Tambourine on the eastern side, across the Scenic Rim Valley to the Cunningham Highway, pretty much there.
So Beaudesert?
And a little bit the other side. So you've got Beaudesert,
yeah.
Boona, Arachula, Calbar, and down to the Lamington Plateau on the border. That's the major area. Thanks.
Yeah. So just keep in mind where I was brought up in Beaudesert.
Right,
when I was a kid, there was cheese used to come from the cheese factory, and that was it. You know, so it was just one of those things, and now if you have a look, Alison will tell you what they do in that region is unbelievable.
Well, I am going to talk quite a bit about the Scenic Rim because I want it to be an example of where things can go and what can be done. But with a database, it's something that should be freely available. When I talk on radio about this area, and if I talk about lamb or olive oil or beef or whatever it is I've come across, or packets of lovely pulses that I've just bought down the road today, whatever it is that I'm talking about, someone is going to be emailing me, phoning me, saying, where can I get it? How do I get hold of this stuff? Now, I can send out to all those people an individual little email saying, ring this man, here's his phone number. It'd be much nicer if I could say, database can be obtained such and such. And that's really what it should be. That's what I do with other regions, because they're the sorts of questions I get a lot. And chefs will ask regularly, you know, look, I'm putting together a Queensland menu, or I'm putting together a menu of a certain region or whatever it is. Can you let me know where I can get the ingredients? So is my question to you now, of whoever's in the room, Is there a database? Does one exist? Anyone know? Okay. Tomorrow someone's going to take on the job. I could easily sit here and say that's a council job, but it may not be a council job either. There are regions where it actually is the job of a food group within the region. So there's no one, it must be such and such a group. You've got to work that out for yourselves, but for goodness sake, it is essential. It's not only essential because of the reasons I've just given you, it's essential for you because you should be knowing who else in your region is doing things. If you get a lovely idea at 2 a.m. in the morning, oh gosh, I'm going to do such and such. We all have those thoughts, don't we? By 6 a.m. you think, oh my God, what was I thinking? But as well as that, look up the database. Oh, nobody else is doing that. Or, oh God, there's 7 of them doing it already. You know, it's for all sorts of reasons. So please.
Can I add to that, please?
Yes.
It's a huge thing, and wherever we've been, firstly when a database is done or we have a day like today, we start identifying products that a lot of people have no idea were in the region. You know, because no one's got a database, no one knows everything that's happening. But there's been a little, Alison, very recently become digitally proficient. Who's on Facebook? Yeah, a lot of people, right? So you know you can have a closed Facebook link, so it only invited people. So there's a variation on the theme that you've got, and that's added to that, so that when you've got a whole lot of cabbages coming on or whatever, you can go onto this group and say, by the way, next week I should have a whole stack of cabbages. So it's not just the database, but it actually comes living because people can then use that. Or a restaurateur could say, look, I'm after rainbow shard or purple carrots or whatever it might be. So it's about bringing it to life also. I'll charge you for that idea later on, Alison. But it's how we can see. I'm getting excited about the digital. No, it's an exciting way of saying how can we make that. Bring it to life and people using that database.
So I suppose the other question, having asked about the database, is what is the purpose of this? And is it to put a branding on the region, as in a physical branding, and these are the words that we'll use? Is it to draw up a lovely logo and some good graphics? Is it to assist in the marketing of the region and thereby the individual products? Is it to assist with events? And those events, are things like Gourmet and Goondiwindi, or this fabulous new idea of Discover Farming. I think that just to say we're dealing in regionalism is far too broad an idea. There needs to be something a bit more pointy nose and directed about it as to exactly where that's going. Branding a region, though, will only happen if everyone's on board. It really doesn't work when there are bits of it happening and bits of it not. Cafes, roadhouses, hotels, and it's wonderful to see the broad spread of people who've come to this today. Hotels, motels, they've all got to play the game. They really do. And someone in a motel will say, well, we only do breakfast. How can we do that? Well, it could be as simple as the cereals that are done there, or it could be the fruit or whatever. Hunt out further afield what's there. Today, we all had lunch very quickly at the larder today. That is the best pumpkin cake, I tell you. I'm after the recipe tomorrow, Mel. It's a cracker. It was really lovely. But how refreshing to find also that things were freshly made. I walk into cafes all the time. They've got these fabulous big kitchens, big combi ovens, the works. And all the cakes come out of frozen boxes. They won't go off for 10 months in the freezer, but they're so boring. And it's not expensive. Sugar, flour, eggs and butter, put them together and you've got a cake that tastes fantastic, but isn't expensive to make and can be sold for a good price. It was lovely seeing that, it really was. I did trawl through on the internet to try and find some menus that featured local, and I was out of luck. I found porterhouse rib fillet, rib on the bone, Texas style sticky pork ribs, butterfly grilled chicken breast. I have no idea where they came from. I'm surprised that usually when they don't come from here, they'll say King Island. Everybody likes to say King Island.
What's wrong with that?
It's not here, that's what's wrong with it. It's there. I think when it does come to branding, there are a few things that I'd just like to quickly show you. These are bags that are branded, and they look terrific. They stand out. They're actually significant bags from an Italian supermarket chain, Coop. And they do them, bananas don't, well they do grow in Italy, but not much. But, you know, that's their signature. And they had two others, one of pumpkins and one of carrots. And it's probably the main supermarket chain, the Woolworths of Italy or whatever. But in talking with the Scenic Rim, they had a bag that wasn't similar to that, it was that style of thing for their festival. And I had one of these as a gift for one of the carrot growers. And last year, this is what they came up with. And how good is that? Isn't that wonderful?
That's really good.
It is fantastic because the bag says what that region is. And that's what I really love about it.
And there's continuity, they're obviously using that.
Yep.
Across.
And just a word of warning. Never, ever, ever put a year on anything you produce. Because if you don't get rid of them all, you could use them the next year. It's always a mistake to put a year on them, so just please remember that. So, in talking about local produce and local menus, that's a leap that has to be leapt in this region. It really does. And you can say, I mean, whenever I brought this up, and we've had lots of small workshops on this, people will say, oh, it's too expensive. You know, I can buy it from the PDF guy who comes through, or Bidvest or whoever, and he gives me a much cheaper price on that sliced ham. That sliced ham will be probably coming out of Canada. It's imported, it's off the bone, so they can bring it into the country, and then it goes to Hands or someone like that, and they just do the processing, stick it into a cryo bag, and on your shelf. But if you've got a cafe, and I'm sorry, I'm using the word cafe, but I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. If you've got a cafe in town, do you want people from Canada coming all the way to your cafe, or do you want the locals to come in? It's a two-way street. It really is. I'm always fond of using Tasmania as an example. Tasmania is a small state. It's got hideously high unemployment. It's pretty much broke all the time. It's got lots of things not going for it. What it does have is a great pride in what they grow, what they produce. And the locals really back that up. You won't find prawns on many menus in Tasmania because they don't have a prawning industry. But you'll find salmon far and wide because that's their industry. You'll find chicken from the north of Tasmania and they will brand it at the simplest of places. They will tell you that, you know, the produce is Tasmanian. That word Tasmanian they use a lot. They use it in little drive-by places on the highways. It's not just, I'm not talking about top-end restaurants, that's a different field altogether. I'm talking about just everyday places, little cafes in the street that the workers go to in Hobart. I spend a lot of time in Tasmania and I notice it every single time. Why is there so much seafood on the menus here and not one branded piece of beef, lamb and pork that I can find on the internet? I think that's a real indictment that there needs to be better pride in what you're producing for it to go on the menus. The next thing that somebody will say to me is, oh, it's too expensive. Now, the example of that is to look at what a chef called Amanda Hines is doing. She's now at Hampton. Amanda and her husband Larry were farmers inland from Bundaberg. They sold the farm about 15, 16 years ago and went to live in Bundaberg and started a cafe called Indulge. It took a few years for what Amanda wanted to do to take traction. She wanted the menu to break all the moulds of country town menus. She wanted it to be all local produce. Now, Bundaberg is Australia's best kept secret. It's full of the biggest diverse range of produce I've ever seen in this country. Because of their microclimates and their different soil types, they've got grey, sandy soil on the coast, they've got rich, deep red soil in the hills and up through Childers. So very diverse country in that way. They've got great beef fattening country inland, but they've also got seafood on the coast. They grow any vegetable you can think of and just about any fruit. So it's really rich in that. Now, our friend James here was the general manager of Bundaberg and North Burma Tourism for many years. And that's where, as was mentioned before, Peter and I did some work in agritourism for him. What was really interesting was that James was scratching his head because he had one of the things that they've got there that no one else does to anywhere near the same degree are the turtles, the baby turtles. And James really put that on the map in getting an interest in that in tourism. And whether you wanted to go to see the turtles laying their eggs or later on hatching out, but it gave a great window of tourism. And of course, they're at the southern end of the Barrier Reef, so they've got all those lovely offshore islands there. But as for the horticulture and the agriculture, that was really ignored. In 2012, I put together a tour, a 3-day tour, up and down on the tilt train, and it was looking at these farms, talking to the farmers, hearing their stories, eating at some amazing places, not just Amanda's restaurant. There's a wonderful Italian family there who make the best fresh pasta you've ever had. And so I was having lunch in her house, all sorts of things like that. It was the hardest tour I've ever had to sell. It was really hard. Because poor old Bundaberg, it doesn't have the best reputation as a place. There's always something bad about Bundaberg on the front page of the Courier Mail, at least once a week. And, it's bad doctors, it's obese people, it's high crime, it's, everything you can think of. But there's such a positive energy in that place, and it's a very, very wealthy place. The positives out of that, though, were that once I took that group, all these people started saying, when are you going to Bundaberg next? I want to come on the next tour. The word gets out. You have to start somewhere. And it was really worthwhile doing it. As was mentioned before about ABC Radio, what I like to do with ABC Radio is tell the stories. I can, make a cake, take it in. I made a lemon curd last weekend, and then made it into a little slice. But there was a story to go with it because the citrus season is just starting, and it gave me the opportunity to talk about all of the various citrus and what time they're coming in and the different varieties and things like that. But what I'll look forward to is taking back, the stories from here and their differences. When you're talking about regional produce, it's not just having a steak and 3 veggies on the plate. It can also be Moroccan food, Mexican food, Indian food. It can be any style of food, but it's using Australian ingredients. It's using your local ingredients. And the more diverse you make it, the better it is. As was Peter mentioned earlier about the masterclass that I used to organise. And one of the nicest things to do was to fly a chef from London or New York or Chicago, wherever they came from, bring them here And they already sent me their recipes. They'd sent me their list of ingredients. And I would have those boxes waiting for them, and this fellow would say, well, I asked for crab, and I'd say, yes, that's a mud crab. Why don't you try it, have a taste of it? He's looking for some Alaskan crab claws or something. It was really lovely to be able to show them what we grow, in the same way that if an Australian chef went there, that's what he'd be getting. They then took those stories back into their kitchens, and those sorts of things are, I think, really, really important. I just want to tell two stories about two producers and places in Queensland that have really made a mark. Some of you may have been to the Spirit House at Yandina. It's a Thai restaurant. It was started by Peter and Helen Brighty, and it was a small farm that grew Asian vegetables just for the Sunshine Coast chefs. That was their start. They'd been restaurateurs up on the Blackwall Range, and it wasn't long before they built a restaurant at Yandina and called it the Spirit House. From that, they then developed a beautiful Asian garden and then a fabulous cookery school. Now, from day one, that cookery school has been booked out. They only take 12 students in a session, but there was nothing else like it here. Everything they've done, though, has been Thai or Asian. They now do tours into Asia. It's all on that core of what they do. And at the same time, they very proudly use Sunshine Coast produce. So they're mixing the two together, and it's been a terrific success. It's been a success for all of those growers and producers whose produce they use, and pass that on to either the restaurant customers who read it on the menu, or to the cookery school. When we were talking before about the project that Peter and I did with James, we probably talked enough about that, only to say though that when we started that project, half a dozen, 8 people, and then probably half a dozen government people. Really, it was very, very small. That's why we all think this is a very positive turnout. But it then, usually takes 12, 18 months for it to sort of gather ideas, people to actually talk to each other about it and say, what do you think we could do together, and so on. It really took about 7 months, and in that time there was one woman in the region who was a great networker, and she really got people going. But in that time they had formed their food group. And from then on they were up and away. Now that's 2008, 9, around that sort of time. 3-4 years ago, they started a fantastic festival called Winter Feast. It happens in July every year. It's the outcome of the festival idea, and it profiles all the food of that region in winter, which is their major producing time. Having said that, January and February, they've got so much tropical fruit, you can't fall over. But, that winter is their big vegetable time, particularly. So I think that, what always looks like a huge mountain to climb over at the beginning is definitely not. It's not that big once you all start talking to each other. And I think that the Eat Local Week is another example of a region that is just remarkable. A word of warning though, as to what you call things and what others might call them. Eat Local Week has been going now, this is going into its 7th year, well established. The year before last, the Gympie region, which brands itself as Gympie Gold Regional Produce, decided that they would start a celebration of their food. Now, we already had Eat Local Week in the Scenic Rim. Gympie decided that they would have a month-long celebration in May and call it Eat Local Month. I can't tell you how much they're hated for that. Don't steal somebody else's name. It's a bad move. And it's such a shame. Of all the words in the English language, why did they do that? The 9-day festival, though, for the Scenic Rim is over the school holidays, and that's a good time. Try not to have things that clash with other big events, and you think, oh, well, they're not near here, we won't worry. Look further ahead than that. I noticed that Discover Farming is during May. Now, I haven't looked closely at the definite dates, but there are 2 big food events on, and they're on at the same time in May. Try not to clash with them. One is Hampton, and the Hampton Festival is close to here, so you would be pulling similar people. And in that same weekend, you've got the Noosa Food and Wine.
And the one at the Discover Farming is that weekend.
That's right, it is that. Well, it goes for a whole month though, but still. This is the first year, maybe next year it can change. But it's
Bright Flushes as well, which is a big food festival.
now that is big. Is it on then too?
The Flushes on the 12th.
Okay, somebody's got to move, and it's always.
Overall.
You do. No, you're absolutely right. There does need to be a calendar drawn up of all the major festivals and events, and then you find your date. And you find that you tread on the toes of something in Rockhampton, that doesn't matter, okay? But not things that are local like that at all. So, you know, and this is only just starting, so it's movable. So that, you know, next year you can change the guideposts a bit, but it is something to definitely be aware of. With Eat Local Week, they've done that bag. They've also done this, which is intriguing, when you find that all these young girls on their lunch breaks in Queen Street, in their very, very high heels, are all walking down the street, it's priceless, with their shopping bags. Okay, and it's from a carrot. And they're very distinctive, and they're beautifully labelled as Scenic Rim. And carrots eat fresh and local from the Scenic Rim. Now those are cheap to produce, but they make a statement. And it was, again, a clever bit of marketing. So little things like that, I say in Queen Street because I did. When they first brought those out, at the time, I was working in the city and I had an office on Queen Street. And you'd go out for lunch break and see all these little orange bags going up with all these young girls. And it was just, they were all vying for them. So the simplest little things can sometimes make a large impact. The other thing and this has been totally funded by council, and I must say it's the first time I've ever seen this happen. Usually it'll be the author self-funding, or it will be a publisher will commission a book. 2 years ago, the council commissioned 2 people, Brenda Forden and Christine Sharp, to write a book about, Christine is a terrific photographer, as well as writer, and Brenda's a chef. And the book was about the produce and the farmers, and tell their stories. Look at that. You know, just beautiful, beautiful work. And that has been a great success. In the last 2 years, they've gone for a number of reprints. And Peter's an author of over 20 books. He knows exactly what I'm talking about. You know, reprint, I'm sorry, most authors have books that they're left in big warehouses. Unlike Peter Howard, who had many reprints. This, you're seeing out of the cupboard for the very first time. This is not launched until the 1st of May. That book's been such a success, the council commissioned a second book of another group of producers and growers. So, you know, they're really thinking ahead. They're not looking at another festival and saying, oh, we like that, we'll do that, oh yes, we'll have that bit. It's already been done. Try and think of something distinctive. It's actually what I really liked when I started to read some of the things about Discover Farming. But one thing intrigues me. I noticed that the events start on the 4th of May with the Goondiwindi show. How much local food is going to be served at the show? Is there going to be lovely local beef or lamb hamburgers? I'd love to see that. It's I don't want to go on too much
All
more.
the
about
outside vendors bringing their own gear, just like Peter did when he first went out.
Well, you're a lamb producer. Set up a tent and do it. It's probably another. Sorry.
Betty would ask me to make the show for the local Lions Club or whatever it was publishing. I asked for 4 days before it takes a week.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's silly. That's silly. You know, you need to sit down with them and say, look, mate, we can't do that. But how about we aim for? Because yes, that's insulting to your product, of course. I think though that you know, these things, given time, given conversations, they really can be done. And it might be that a group of you band together and just do one tent together. But a show draws the whole of the region together. It's an important event. You know, the ag shows are really important in any town in Australia. And it's a great chance to show off. Peter talked before about what we did at the ECA. Our stand, our stage was called The Taste of Queensland. And that's what it was. We had produce from all over the state. And we cooked and we cooked and we cooked for 10 days. And as he rudely says, the rum was very good at the end of the day. But
Is that a Bundaberg bad news story or a good news story?
Oh, that was a good news story. But, you know, it gave us the most amazing amount of pride to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
And so often we would have those farmers up there with us. If they could get, you know, to Brisbane, and so many of them really wanted to, it was lovely. With Amanda Hines, I didn't quite finish the story. She and her husband Larry sold Indulge Cafe in Bundaberg a couple of years ago. And 6 months ago, she opened a restaurant at Hampton called Emerald. And all through last year, Amanda was on the road looking for local produce. And if she saw something in a paddock, she went and knocked on the door. She walked across the field. And her menu is amazing. This is a restaurant that has only been open for a few months, and she's only lived in the region just over 12 months. Don't say it can't be done, because it can, and there's the proof. And she's got a fellow, probably 100 metres away from the restaurant. And he grows specifically for her. And he arrives with a polystyrene box of mixed lettuces, and they're all this high. When you're a restaurant and you want cute little lettuces to go beside your lamb chop, that's what he's growing for her. There is a market for that. And this is at Hampton. We're not talking about, you know, the Golden Triangle in Brisbane restaurants. We're talking about a very small country place that if you're driving to Crow's Nest and you blink, you won't even see Hampton. And you've got a much bigger town. Yours takes lots of years. So, you know, I just will not accept that it can't be done, because there are too many examples where it can. There's a restaurant in Brisbane called Wild Canary. It's at Brookfield. It's a nursery and then a restaurant added on, and it's truly lovely. And that chef is always looking for regional produce. And what I find here, I'll be telling Amanda and him about it, because I know that, you know, they'll both be very interested.
Woolworths and Coles and Aldi, we don't want to be rude about our people, but again, from our experience in Bundaberg and other areas, and in the Yock here also, is that some farmers feel, although the census, that they're being ripped off or being bamboozled and whatever, and bullied a bit about their prices. So there's a number of farmers now have said, we want to be price makers, not price takers. So, to your point, there are farmers now that are growing things at an agreed rate for restaurants. Or saying, we're not going to, there's a guy that I know who still produces in season 2 centres of watermelons a day that goes to the markets. But as well as that, he's producing smaller quantities of things for restaurants. And he's also doing value-added ginger products and all kinds of things. So he's being a smart business person, because he's actually hedging his bets in terms of the way he does work. So that's an important thing. We mentioned seasonality, and again we'll talk to Amanda, and Amanda would have loved to have been here, but her since we started planning this, her restaurant has just exploded, and she can't get away from it. She's stapled to the place by chains. But I remember when last year, do you remember last year when avocados were $6 and $7 each in January, February? They come from New Zealand, and I'm not going to have any rudeness about New Zealand, but by the time they got here, not only were they $7, but they were pretty ordinary avocados. So she said, I am not doing avocados, smashed avocados and toast, which is one of the biggest sellers. She said, I'm not doing it. It's not an issue of price, it's the fact that Bundaberg, where she was at the time, has a huge avocado crop. They don't grow them at that time of year. They weren't in season, and she said, we're getting a second-rate product. So why would I bring my standards down, and why would I disappoint my guests who come and eat here by selling a second-rate product? So I'm not only going to New Zealand, but she would do that with all kinds of things. And to your point, you know, why buy Florida cherries when we can see when cherries come out of Stanford and beautiful and they're fresh and you look forward to them. So seasonality, and a number of restaurateurs I talk to, because I'm usually in the firing line, they go, oh, but we've always got to have this on the menu. We go, well, hang on, what's wrong with seasonal menus? You know, what's wrong with highlighting, you know, that this is now in season and let's have it as your figs are. You know, figs are on it and that's it, fantastic. They're fresh, there's plenty of them, let's make a highlight of them. So, you know, it's about doing that. It's also about, and again, to Peter's point, there is nowhere in Australia, and I think Bundaberg's one of the closest places probably, but there is nowhere that produces everything. So there's nothing wrong with looking at and saying, okay, we're not going to have a whole menu full of local produce because it won't work. But perhaps we have a signature dish. Perhaps we have something that's special, whether it be something like a hamburger, a simple thing like that, whether it's a pie, and I can tell you the story up on the Bunny Mountain. It's a beautiful spot. And there's a great little restaurant up there and a bar, and they used to have frozen meat pies. And they decided to, after I'd been bashing them in the ear with my stories, decided to go and make their own meat pies, use butcher down the bottom. I see with a butcher here, they're very important people, butchers. A butcher down the bottom of the mountain who found the right product for them, and not only do they make more money per pie, they're selling a huge amount more, and they've got really satisfied customers because they've got this homemade beef pies. And they can say, you know, this came from XYZ butcher down the bottom of the town. I know he gets his cattle from Oki or whatever it's going to be. So there's the story there, you know, and we'll talk about stories in this because it is about stories, it's about that. So, you know, they make more money out of using local produce. And they have the general store up there, and they cannot get enough local produce in terms of the value-added things for people to take and buy with it as a souvenir. Quite amazing. The demand they have for up there on a weekend. If anyone's been up the Bunyas on a weekend, it's huge. So you know, there's all those opportunities there which you've got here. As I say, you've got all these people coming by on the highway. So you know, how do we get the product to them? How do we get people involved? You know, I mentioned the butchers and the bakers. I haven't lived in Bundy for 5 years now. Whenever I'm up there doing a bit of business, they know me honestly because I have this big bag and they say, oh, can we check that in? Oh. And it's not rum. It's pork sausages. Right, from a butcher there who does fantastic thick pork sausages. He said you can't call them fat pork sausages because it doesn't sound good, thick pork sausage. And it's true, and he's double smoked bacon. And so, you know, that we forget when we talk about produce in the area that we have people like butchers who produce things. And you know, I found that most Queensland towns, there's a lot of butchers. We did talk about rubbish and ham from some other areas earlier. Have smoked their own hams, and they're wonderful hams. So we've got to think, you know, in sensible things, not really out too far. You've got right there a source of things there. The other one's the bacon. I go, I have to lose some weight, but I go to Mundubra, of all places. Their bakery does the best double high top loaf that you can have. You know those ones you split apart with your hands, and you pull the middle out of it. So, why isn't that a hero for us? You know, why isn't that a hero for our food? So if someone comes in for a toasting, let's have it on a double high top, or whatever, you know, it might be that you have, because these are things that are country things, that people, you know, I live in Brisbane, not because I love Brisbane, it's a great spot. I've lived in rural and regional Australia most of my life, but because my life now is going out to these areas, is that if I don't live in Brisbane, it's really hard transport-wise for me to get my way around the state. But I haven't found a decent, you might be able to tell me wrong, Alison, seeing you get around, I have not found a decent double high top loaf in Brisbane yet. There we go, there's a challenge for you.
My lips are sealed.
So that's just me personal, but you know, these are things